Hello, everyone, and welcome to our workshop on how to do research and get published. Today, we're focusing on what it takes to get published in an academic journal, specifically focused on research integrity and ethics. To get us started, I'd first like to introduce you to our team. Victor Lachlan is a senior member of the research integrity team at Sage. He's worked for other publishers in research integrity roles, and his background is in philosophy with a particular interest in ethics. He holds a PhD from the University of Antwerp and a Master's in Fine Arts from Edinburgh University and Queen's University Belfast. Next, Alex Morrison is a publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team, managing a range of scientific and medical journals. Alex has a background in content management, magazine publishing, and literary publishing. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies from the University of Denver and a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of New Orleans. Next, Dr. Ellen Chetwynd is editor-in-chief of the Journal of Human Lactation, a practicing lactation consultant, nurse, and maternal child health researcher with a focus in epidemiology. She has written and presented widely on research ethics, both through her editorial work and as an invited speaker for organizations such as the International Board of Lactation Consultant Examiners and the National Lactation Consultant Alliance. And last, my name is Sean Scarsbrick, a marketing manager on the author marketing team at Sage, and my primary role is to provide support to authors and reviewers as they move through the publishing process. Today, please send us your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll address as many as we can live at the end of the call, in addition to typing answers to you as well. For any questions we don't have time to reach or to answer today, we'll follow up in a blog post. And now, to get it situated, we want to start off with the timeline of a typical author journey. It starts off here at the very beginning stages of securing funding, all the way through resubmission. Our webinar series covers all of these in a number of capacities. So if you're interested in a specific area, we do recommend you check out one of our past webinars, watch a recording, or of course, register for a future webinar. And with that, I'm happy to pass it over to Victor.
Thanks, Sean. Hello, everyone. So start basically at the beginning. What is research integrity? Well, research integrity is there to promote principles of responsible research. What is responsible research? This is research that has been conducted ethically, which means that the methods, findings of the research have been described honestly and accurately, and those findings can be reproduced and they can be replicated. Next slide, please, Sean. So research integrity is a shared responsibility among all of us in the scholarly community. It isn't just that researchers have to act ethically, it's that all participants within this community act in an ethical manner. So for example, institutions like universities. So universities, funding bodies should be there to promote ethical behavior in researchers, and in some cases, and should engage in when ethical issues are raised, they should respond in an appropriate manner and try and address those issues. But it also requires organizations such as like the Committee on Publication Ethics. They provide guidelines to publishers on how to maintain the integrity of the scholarly record. Also requires services such as indexing services like Clarivate to actively monitor the scholarly record for ethical breaches. And ultimately also depends on journals and publishers to always ensure that high ethical standards are maintained in all of their published output. So what are high standards in research? So when thinking of research that maintains those high standards, we're thinking of things like there's appropriate and timely ethical approval of a study, there is suitable participant consent, and the research design of the study is appropriate to the topic of the study, there's inclusion of appropriate stakeholders in the research, and there's also been transparent reporting of all methods and results in order to ensure, as I previously said, that those results can be both reproduced and replicated. Next slide, please, Sean. What about published articles? So what does it mean to look for high standards in articles, in published articles? Things to look for are articles that have been independently peer reviewed, and that peer review process has been conducted in an open, fair, and transparent manner. All contributors to an article have been appropriately recognized. Journals and publishers have followed COPE guidelines, industry best practices, and actively do so. But also publishers participate in industry-wide initiatives like the STM Integrity Hub, which is there to help sustain and promote the integrity of the scholarly record. What can publishers do to actively maintain an accurate and scholarly record? Things like ensuring that content at the point of publication is always accurate. Ensure that if any errors or omissions in articles that have been identified post-publication are corrected in a prompt and transparent manner. Ensure that any unreliable research that has been identified by the publisher is then appropriately marked for readers, and readers are aware of that fact. Make sure that authors remain accountable for the research that they publish. And make sure that if research has been identified post-publication that is seriously flawed, is harmful, that this is both highlighted to readers, but is then addressed via mechanisms such as correction or, in the most serious cases, retraction. Publishers, unfortunately, though, as I, from my own personal experience, can attest, face multiple challenges, however, in maintaining an accurate scholarly record. Things such as data fabrication, so the data has been invented, data falsification, where data has been manipulated, salami slicing, where one study is then cut into finer and finer parts to produce multiple articles, plagiarism, which can involve things like text recycling, tortured phrases, AI text, image manipulation, lack of human ethics, consent, gift authorship, where authors are added to an article even though they did not contribute to that article. Citation manipulation, where authors can add citations to an article for profit. And these multiple factors can be perpetuated by third-party organizations such as paper mills, which actively engage in promoting fraudulent research for profit.
And so, in addition to publishers, researchers themselves also have an important role in upholding research integrity best practices. So, first, the researcher's role is to determine authorship. And all listed authors on a research paper must meet the following criteria: made a significant contribution to the concept design, acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data. 2, drafted the article or revised it critically for important intellectual content. 3, approved the final version of the article for publication. Or 4, agreed to be accountable for all aspects of the work and resolved any issues related to its accuracy or integrity. And note that the second and third requirements should not disqualify those who have made substantial contributions to the research. In addition, approvals for all studies involving people, whether patients or research participants, must be evaluated by a qualified research ethics committee prior to undertaking the research in line with the Declaration of Helsinki. Ethics statements should be included in the methods section of all relevant submissions, unless the journal you're submitting to publishes them under a separate heading. And each individual journal's submission guidelines will make this clear. And those statements must include the name and location of the review board, approval number, and date. Some type of research, such as fieldwork in other countries, are on rare indigenous plants or on archaeological specimens, require special permissions as well. In regards to data analysis, it's important to keep accurate records of data collected, analyzed, and processed. And if you are generating images, ensure that these are high quality and not modified. And if there are participant images, please ensure they have given permission for publication. Pre-registration of study protocols is a practice that involves submitting detailed plans of a study to a public registry before conducting the research. This ensures transparency, collaboration, and even potentially conditional acceptance. Registration of your clinical trial or systematic review also helps with transparency. So following Equator guidelines, Equator stands for Enhancing the Quality and Transparency of Health Research. And they provide reporting guidelines, which are simple, structured tools for health researchers to use while writing manuscripts. A reporting guideline provides a minimum list of information needed to ensure a manuscript can be, for example, understood by a reader, replicated by a researcher, used by a doctor to make a clinical decision, and included in a systematic review. Equator defines a reporting guideline as a checklist, flow diagram, or structured text to guide authors in reporting a specific type of research, developed using explicit methodology. Some journals encourage or may even require authors to upload data to relevant public repositories. You can use Repository Finder, Fair Sharing, or re3data.org to search for a suitable repository. Research data should be submitted to discipline-specific, community-recognized repositories where possible, or to general-purpose repositories if no suitable community resource is available. SAGE encourages authors to select a data repository that issues a persistent identifier, preferably a digital object identifier or a DOI, and has established a robust preservation plan to ensure the data is preserved in perpetuity. If you share your data on a repository, please provide a URL link to your research data in your manuscript file under the heading Data Availability Statement. This URL link will then be added to your article upon publication. Additionally, a number of SAGE journals participate in a partnership with Figshare, an open repository of research data whereby SAGE automatically archives your research data when you choose to submit this alongside your article within the existing manuscript submission flow. Finally, it's important to hold on to any primary or secondary data in case there are questions from peer reviewers or the editor, or any further work is required during the revision process. Next slide. Yep, thank you. So when deciding on where to submit your article, it's important to check the legitimacy of the journal you are submitting to. Some things to look out for. Is there an editor and an editorial board listed? Is there a peer review process listed? Transparency is key. Any submission or article processing charges should be disclosed. You can use thinkchecksubmit.org to check your article. PubPeer is also a good resource, as well as Retraction Watch. Do not collaborate with journals who guarantee acceptance, which points to a lack of peer review. If you are asked to cite the reviewers or the editor's publication during peer review, it's important to contact the publisher. And additionally, you should contact the publisher if a reviewer breaches confidentially and contacts you privately. So some things to consider when you're structuring your article. Regarding acknowledgments, someone does not count as an author if they have participated solely in the acquisition of funding, collection of data, and general supervision of the research group. However, if there are contributors who may have done one or more of these things, but do not meet the criteria for authorship, then they can and should be listed in the acknowledgments section. The inclusion of a detailed ethics approval and informed consent statements is a fundamental requirement for many research articles. At the initial review stage, there is a check to see that appropriate ethics approval and informed consent statements have been provided by the authors. If theirs are missing or incomplete, the manuscript would be sent back to the authors, and the manuscript would not be moved forward to peer review, or additional information would be requested at the first revision. Providing this information at submission reduces the likelihood of a manuscript being sent back prior to peer review or spending more time in revision. Be sure to state if you have any conflicts of interest or funding. If you have nothing to disclose, state that as well. Medical fields have a few additional requirements here, so always check journal manuscript submission guidelines and, if relevant, provide relevant reporting checklist for your study type and provide a copy of the completed reporting checklist with your submission. When formatting your references, be sure to check the reference style guide followed by your chosen journal. Harvard, Vancouver, and APA reference styles are commonly used. Other style guides available for certain journals are ACS, AMA, ASA, Chicago Manual of Style, and CSE. If you're submitting a paper directly from a preprint server, make sure the formatting and file type is correct and properly anonymized where appropriate. We often hear people ask if they are more likely to have their paper accepted if they cite literature previously published in the journal. The short answer is no. This is not necessarily true. The bigger issue at hand is that the reference list should be comprehensive and relevant. It is always good to have recent literature within the last 5 years be a good portion of the references. Reviewers get concerned if there aren't recent references, especially if they do exist. It is good to reference other papers published in the journal to which you would like to submit, as that shows your research is somewhat related to that journal's aims and scope. However, it is not compulsory and will not necessarily increase the chances of your article being published. We take great care to advise our editors and reviewers not to make judgments about a paper based on personal, financial, or intellectual biases or any other considerations. The quality of the research and written presentation of the paper are paramount. Our editors are also committed to maintaining and promoting consistent ethical policies for journals. As most journals have word and figure limits, you may want to consider supplementary material. This can be a great way to illustrate your research. For instance, videos and audio files cannot be printed in a journal, but are interactive elements to host alongside your article online. They also increase visibility of a published article. Next slide. Thank you. So listed here are some examples of disclosure statements you can include in your cover letter to allow for full transparency of your submission. For instance, no conflict of interest exists in the submission of this manuscript. The study was funded by the X of the University of X. This is an invited contribution to the special issue on X, and I was invited by the guest editor, Dr. X. These are all examples you could use for disclosing different things regarding your article. Next slide. Thank you. The role of peer reviewers in research integrity is to review article submissions before acceptance. The three keys to this are: 1, evaluation. Peer reviewing research helps publications select the highest quality of articles. 2, integrity. Peer review ensures the integrity of the publishing process and the scholarly record. And 3, quality. The filtering process and revision advice offered by verified experts within the academic field improves the quality of the final article, as well as providing the author with new insights into their research. As a peer reviewer, it is your job to highlight conceptually poor or flawed research to the editor. This may look like anything from unclear or incorrect methods to major flaws in data, tables, or figures. It is your job to raise concerns about suspicious or ethically dubious studies to the editor or publisher. For instance, peer reviewers may check to see if a paper is properly referenced. 3, it is your job to contact the editor if you have seen a similar study submitted or published elsewhere. Contact the editor or publisher if you have concerns about text recycling, use of AI tools, or image manipulation. Contact the editor if the data reported by authors appears to be used without permissions, does not appear plausible, or might be fabricated. And finally, it's your responsibility to recuse yourself if you know the authors or are in any way conflicted. The peer review process is confidential. You must not make personal use of unpublished information or communicate the content of manuscripts to others without the prior agreement of the journal. Please do not contact the authors directly without the permission of the journal. If you are reviewing for a journal that uses double anonymized peer review and come to discover the identity of the author through any means, such as reading a preprint or seeing a paper presented at a conference, please inform the journal editor immediately. Please do not use AI tools or large language models like ChatGPT to generate review reports. Peer review should not use the author's research to advance their own research agenda. Peer reviewers should not request unnecessary citation to their or others' publications, and peer reviewers should always maintain a respectful tone.
Thank you very much, Alex. And thank you, Victor. And now we're very happy to pass it over to our guest panelist, Ellen, to share some tips and takeaways.
Thank you, Sean. The primary goal I'd like to just present to all of you about this whole process. There are so many pieces of this communication that have been talked about and that we need to keep in mind as we are building the science base, the evidence base. But really, this is just a human system, and it's built entirely on our efforts across all of us, authors, publishers, editors, and peer reviewers, to communicate in a way that is respectful to each other. So yes, there are protocols and policies. If you take a moment and ask yourself as you're writing or as you're reviewing, how you can be as clear and transparent as possible with those that you're working with, I think that will be kind of the base. That's the base we all work from in this effort to create a really positive and useful evidence base across health, across science, for the readers of all of our journals. So communication is really key, and everything is based on this idea of clarity and transparency. And I can speak to my position as the editor-in-chief of a Journal of Human Lactation, that my goal as an editor-in-chief is always to create community, and that community, again, includes all of the people, authors, publishers, editors, peers, and readers. So I am constantly working to make sure that the communication that we create as a journal is as clear as possible to those who are writing or reviewing for us. Along these lines, I would close by saying, if you have a question or are confused by a piece of the process that you're going through as an author or as a peer, it is always okay to connect with the journal that you're working with or the publisher. We're all here in order to make this process work and to make it as functional as possible. So we are resources for you. And with that, I'd like to pass it back.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your very expert insights. It's nice to hear from someone outside of Sage for your thoughts, and it's very useful for our audience as well. So we're actually getting prepared right now to move into a live Q&A and address some of the questions that you're sending. So I do ask everybody, please send us your questions there. You'll see the widget at the bottom of your screen. We already see lots of great questions coming through. Before we get into that, I have to plug the rest of the webinar series, the rest of the webinars we have planned throughout the year. So next week, we have a webinar specifically on the publication journey for those in clinical research. So if anybody is in that area looking for more insight on how to get published, we'd recommend this one. Similar setup in mid-October, but specifically on oncology. We've also got two others, one on institutional and library resources, and one on how to write a successful textbook proposal. So definitely tune in if you're interested. And for anybody who'd like some more peer review training, we've got this available as well. We've got a QR code and we've got a URL, so feel free to register for that. This will cover the basics on how to get started as a peer reviewer, how to sign up, how to conduct good peer review, and tips and tricks to get you selected as a potential peer reviewer for a forthcoming manuscript. We at Sage host our information for authors pages where we've got tons of information for you as an author to get started, dedicated how to get published resources, answers to common questions. You can learn more about what paper you can share, when and where. There's a huge treasure trove of insights there, so feel free to poke around. And last, I'd like to plug our forthcoming author newsletter. With this is an exclusive offer to anybody who registers. So we've got the QR code up if you're interested. You can get free access to publishing resources as well as be the first to know about our upcoming webinars. So I'd recommend if you're enjoying today's webinar and if you enjoy Sage resources, definitely sign up for this. I'll leave this up on the screen as we get started into our Q&A. So again, as I said before, please continue to send us your questions. The first question I'd like to ask to our panelists, is it possible, can we publish two articles from a single ethical clearance? A portion of results may be the same for both of the articles, but the aim and scope are different. What are your initial thoughts on this?
I think Jessica has responded to that question in the Q&A. As Jessica points out, it does depend. It depends a lot on the key thing is, as she makes clear, is the articles have to have different aims and objectives, and you can't duplicate results. My concern there is if you are doing that from a research integrity point of view, is that you will inadvertently may duplicate results. And if you do duplicate results, then that is not okay. And you should not be doing that in any shape or form. And so it can be safer just if you have single ethical clearance, one article is then produced from that ethical clearance. As Jessica makes clear, this can be a case-by-case situation. But the most important takeaway there is that you do not use that single ethical clearance to duplicate results and then produce multiple articles with the same results.
I can add to that as well that just trying to piece those two answers together, that yes, it can sometimes be appropriate and be extraordinarily careful about duplicating results. And that is taking a look at what you're publishing and what your ethical review board has given you permission to do. If you go too far away from what your ethics board has approved, then you're publishing something without the approval of an ethical board. So, so the other kind of line to follow is in what I'm publishing, do I have the permission from my ethical board to do exactly what I'm doing? And if you haven't asked your ethical board if you can publish two papers out of the same results, then you're walking on shaky ground. You're running the risk that Victor suggested.
That's a great point. Thank you. I'd like, if I may, to follow up with this slightly. We have a question here from Xavier. It's a really interesting one about converting a doctoral thesis into potential manuscripts. And I'm wondering there if some of what you've already outlined is similar or different. So if somebody's going to, someone who is currently working on their PhD or recently finished is looking to publish their dissertation, are there ethical considerations they need to keep in mind, potentially splitting that out into multiple journal articles?
If I can jump in there, in response to your question, yet there's always ethical considerations to keep in mind when using any data set. as Ellen previously pointed out in answer to the previous question, does that require ethical approval? Does your data set require ethical approval? Have you got approval for that? Have you got approval to publish multiple articles from that single data set? It's very important whenever writing articles, attempting to get those articles published, that you always keep ethical considerations in mind and at the forefront of your thought, because that is what it will ensure that more likely your article will be reviewed well, and hopefully then will eventually then be published. And you want to think about how then your article will then be cited. You want to produce good research in order that it will then be cited. And maintaining high ethical standards right throughout that entire process from an author's point of view is your best shot at gaining that goal.
I can speak to this one as well. From the dissertation perspective, I went back to school late in life, so it's not all that long ago that I had my own dissertation to publish. And I think again, it's the intention of the intention at the beginning. Was this intended to be a single study, or was it intended to be several studies? The other thing to keep in mind is that a dissertation paper is serving a different purpose than a paper that's going to be published in a science journal. And a paper published in a science journal, particularly a journal that might have specific criteria for publication, is going to require quite a bit of reformatting, packaging in order to move a dissertation into something that is publishable in a journal. Often the dissertation is written with several different research aims in mind, and then maybe it would be best to separate it into multiple papers. The word count of dissertations are extraordinarily high in many cases, and it's going to be much lower in a science publication. So that in and of itself is going to require you to narrow it down and repackage it. It's just always important to be as transparent in your communication to every aspect that you're working with.
We've actually run previous webinars on converting your thesis into a manuscript. So if that's an area you're interested in, I'd recommend taking a look there. Sorry, I'm looking for the next question I've got here. So question, I'm an author and I believe that my paper was reviewed using AI, or that the reviewer of the paper used AI. What do I do?
I'd love to address this one if I may.
Sorry, Helen, you go ahead.
The editor who has a peer that might be using AI would be very interested in knowing that. So if you have a suspicion, if you have a thought about that, there's two pieces of it. First, it's a very serious statement to make that you believe that this has been done. And secondly, it is something that your editor will take very seriously and would like to know. So I would say keep those two pieces in mind. Again, communication is key, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are as well, Victor.
Thanks, Ellen. Yes, so SAGE has clear policies about what reviewers can and cannot do in terms of using AI tools during review. So they can use an AI tool to assist, so to improve, say, the language of their report or the grammar in the report. They cannot use an AI in any shape or form to generate any of the content of their review. So if an author feels that a reviewer has used an AI yes, they should contact the editor, they should contact the publisher, and they should provide evidence as to why they think an AI has been used. Because if it's, and examples, for example, I think this sentence was written using an AI, or I think this text has been produced using an AI. That it'll be looked at by the editor, and likely it'll be flagged to my team in order to then investigate it. We would then investigate it, and if it has been determined that the reviewer has used an AI to generate content in their report, then their report will not be included in the final decision made on that manuscript. So there is, as Alan pointed out, there's a whole process that will be then. It is a very serious claim to make, and a whole process will be enacted once that claim has been made and then investigated.
Great. Thank you both. Lots of good insights there. We've got another question here about ethical boards. So the question is, do most universities have their own ethics board? And if not, what should you do? What should a researcher do?
There are independent ethics boards that can be used. Often there's a cost to that. The nice thing about an ethics board within a university is it's usually one of the support systems that's provided to the students in the university as their students and professors as they're producing.
Perfect. That's good to know. Thank you. I've got another question about authorship. So somebody asked, they wrote that they had conducted a systematic review and someone had analyzed abstracts of previous studies only, and the rest of the writing, the process, the editing was done by this person. Would the person who analyzed the abstracts, should they be acknowledged as a reviewer in the acknowledgement? Should they be acknowledged as an author? How does that person fit in? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, as Alex identified earlier on in the webinar, SAGE has clear policies of what counts as for authorship. So if you're uncertain as to whether this individual counts as an author, look at those policies, and they will tell you whether or not they should be added as an author or whether they should be added as in the acknowledgement. But that goes for any publisher. All publishers will have a criteria as to what counts as for authorship. COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, also has criteria on what counts as authorship. You can also check there as well. So there's many resources that you can access in order to check whether that individual counts as an author. If they don't count as an author, do not add them as an author. And that's the most important point. That will save you a lot of hassle, and that will preserve the integrity of your research.
Sorry, Sean.
Sorry, Sean.
Sorry, I'm doing it again. Excuse me. Very good question coming through about editorial boards. So somebody was wondering if there's a case where there may be bias done with the research, how does the editorial board identify it? Any insider tips from what does an editorial board look for?
Could you repeat that question one more time? I'm not sure I got all of it.
Yes, sorry. The question here is about how an editorial, just essentially tips for how an editorial board identifies any sort of bias that was conducted in the research.
What I can say as far as that is that it's a very iterative process, and we're all looking for bias. Every person who looks at the paper is going to be thinking about potential sources of bias. bias is it's not a black and white topic area. It is very nuanced. And it also doesn't mean that a study is unpublishable if there are identified sources of bias. In reality, can any of us as humans be unbiased in any of the work that we do? All we can do is be transparent about the biases that we can identify. And the thing that is different to me, as somebody who works in healthcare and someone who works in research, the difference between healthcare and research is that in research, the best thing that you can do is to just strip yourself bare and present all of your biases, all of the things that could possibly be influencing the work that you do, and have a very robust limitations section, which is not how we present in the healthcare field. It's just a different way of thinking. In research, the stronger, more transparent you are about the places where there might be biases or limitations in the statements that you make, the stronger the article actually is.
That's really insightful. Thank you very much. Thank you for for your insider view too. I think that's really helpful to know. I think with that, actually, I think we're about time to wrap up the webinar today. I see a number of questions that are still open in the Q&A, and a lot of them deal with specifically on AI. So as part of the follow-up, we'll send a link to our AI policy at Sage. If you've got any questions there, that'll be your best place to get started. I also see a number of questions coming through about certificates and slides, and know that we will send certificates and slides to everybody who is attending us live. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us live, and a huge thank you to our speakers, to Victor, to Alex, and Dr. Chetwynd. We appreciate your insights and all of your input today. So thank you to everybody joining us, and we hope to see you in a future webinar. Take care.